What I was thinking about talking about tonight is something in one of Thich Nhat Hanh's books about his explanation of the different tenets of Buddhism. And one of them is called The Two Truths. And the two truths describe in Buddhism what they refer to as the ultimate dimension and the the normal dimension. There's a word for it. I'm at a loss at the moment for it. But basically, reality as we see it, and then reality as we don't see it. And in Buddhism, to understand the way things work or operate, you have to have an understanding of how both things work and how they work together. And so when you look at any given situation in life, there's more than one way to look at it. And I think that's what the Buddhists are trying to explain, or trying to put words to, is that there's more than one truth, or more than one side to truth. And in our everyday life, where we pick things up and we put them down and we walk on the roads and we drive our cars and we eat our food and we do all the things that humans do, that's one part of reality. That's our normal everyday lives. But superimposed on that is a different dimension, a dimension that's referred to as the ultimate dimension. And the ultimate dimension is where everything is interconnected, where nothing stands by itself. In our everyday life, we look at a chair sitting on the floor, or we look at food on the counter, and we think of these things as separate objects. When looked at from the ultimate dimension, nothing is separate because everything relies on everything else to exist. Food is made up of components of the earth and the air and the sky and our water, that everything is interrelated and interconnected, and everything is made from everything else. So everything has a connection between it. And when we eat food, we're basically putting the same components into our body as our bodies are made of. And so it's a circular connection between what we are and what everything else is, when you look at it from the ultimate dimension. I was reading a book the other night, one of the Zen masters, Katagiri, I think, a contemporary of Suzuki Roshi, and he was talking about when we look at fish, that you can't look at a fish without looking at the water it lives in. Because without the water, the fish can't exist. So the two are so interrelated, so interconnected, that even though you can take the fish out of water, the fish doesn't live without water. So in a sense, they're so connected that it's hard to talk about one without the other. If there was no water, there'd be no fish, because there'd be nothing for the fish to live in. And the water is made up of the rains from the sky that come from the mist and the fog that comes up from the earth when the sun heats things up. So all of these things create a cycle of life that are connected to one another. And when we look at life that way, when we look at both sides of truth, we realize that you can't look at one without the other. It's too simplistic. You can't just look at the chair sitting on the floor without realizing that the chair is simply the same energy, the same atoms, the same movement of atoms as the floor is, but configured differently. So there's really no distinction between one thing or another on one level. It's just that at the moment it happens to be existing in a certain manifestation or a certain state of being, but everything is made of the same thing. Now, in our everyday life, that doesn't make a lot of difference. We still have to get up in the morning and get ready and go to work or take care of the kids or whatever we do in our life. But when we try to understand what our place is, what our purpose is, if we only look at that one side, we start to feel like there's not much meaning. Because when we look at part of something instead of the whole, we realize that it's not complete. And if you focus on the everyday, ordinary aspects of the truth, that things exist as separate entities and separate objects, and that we are separate from everyone else, in one sense that's true, but it's an incomplete view, and with that incomplete view comes frustration and an unsatisfactoriness, because we know deep down that it's not the complete truth. In order for something to be meaningful to us, we need to be able to understand the interconnectedness of it so that we see its place in the universe. And I think that's what we've lost in our modern day lives. We've lost that ability to look at both sides of the truth. That there is a mundane, individualized, separate representation of everything that is, but at the same time, it's all interrelated and connected and relies on everything else. We rely on everything. We think we're separate. Most people think that they're separate, that they can live on their own, they don't need anyone else. The only reason that they function in society is because it's more enjoyable or they get something out of it, but they believe if they had to, they could live on their own, they could take care of themselves. They could basically spend their days alone, do what they do, and not have a lot of interaction with anything or everyone else. But in reality, that can't happen, because everything that we need to exist comes from something else. All the way down to, not just the simple things like food and shelter and companionship. It goes deeper than that. We can't exist without everything that's around us. We need everything to be as it is in order for us to survive and exist. Because we're made up of the same thing at some level. And when we get a taste of that, when we get a slight understanding that we are not alone, that we are not separate, that we need everything and everyone around us, and that everything, in honesty, everything is cooperating for us to live and to exist. Everything supports us. Because without water and air and minerals and energy and all of those things that make up everything, we wouldn't exist either as we are. So we rely on our abilities to use the things around us and to benefit from the things around us, to exist. And when we get a deeper and deeper understanding of that, we start to lose the idea of separation. And we start to look at other people not as other people. We look at them as contributing factors to our lives as we contribute to theirs. So there's a symbiotic connection between us that allows each of us to exist. And if we were to separate ourselves from others, it'd be like taking the fish out of the water. You can take the fish out of the water, but it isn't going to survive for very long because its natural habitat, its natural place in this world is in the water. Just like our natural place is in the air, if you will, on this earth, existing with everyone else, helping and receiving from everything around us so that we can continue in this manifestation that we call a human being. We need the water from the sky. We need the air in the atmosphere. We need the sunlight that energizes all of these functions, that causes food to grow, that causes the air that we breathe to be purified. If you took away any one component of this earth, the whole system would collapse because it's completely and totally interconnected on every single level. And when you think about that, or if you get a feel of that, it's like, it's fascinating. It it strikes a chord of wonder in you that without everything around me, I wouldn't exist. So, in a sense, everything is there for me as I am there for it. So now, if with that feeling, I can look at another person and I feel no sense of separation, no sense of I don't know who they are, I'm afraid of them. All fear goes away because you know that everything is needed. Even the person that you distrust or dislike or is doing something that you don't approve of, in some way, shape, or form, they contribute to the totality that is needed for you to exist.